Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. And today we're going to talk about a book that I found enchanting, a book that I found was difficult to put down. The title is My Berlin Kitchen. And most importantly, it has a subtitle, A Love Story with Recipes. The author, Luisa Weiss, is with us today, and her book is published by Viking. Thank you for coming all this way from Germany.
Thank you for having me.
And we didn't pay your airfare, so the book, I think, has a perfect title. My Berlin Kitchen. It's certainly about Berlin and kitchens. And the subtitle is very precise also, A Love Story with Recipes. Recipes like Alsatian flatbread, depression stew, which actually is your father's recipe, not yours.
Yes.
And something called quark cheesecake. Quark cheesecake. I want, for the purpose of educating the San Francisco audience, for you to tell us what it is, a quark cheesecake.
Well, quark is a German fresh cheese, sort of like our cream cheese. We make, Americans make cheesecake out of cream cheese.
Okay.
And Germans make cheesecake out of quark.
Out of quark. Okay. I was afraid of that word for a while. It's not subversive. It's just cream cheese. Mm-hmm. That's all there is to it. And you're a person of a fascinating background. You were born not so long ago. You're young, at least by my measure. Mm-hmm. And you were born in West Berlin.
Yep. To
a mother who was
Italian.
And is Italian.
She's still Italian.
It's Italian. And your father was American. Mm-hmm. And the other important person in your very early life, your mother was an interpreter, mm-hmm. and she originally came from Rome. Mm-hmm. And the person who got you through the early stages of your life was Joni. Mm-hmm. And Joni was, what's the German word for it?
A Tagesmutter, which means a day mother.
A day mother.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And she has a husband, Dietrich, mm-hmm. and they're still part of your life.
Very much so.
Yeah. And you've had a very hard time because of this kind of varied background in answering the simple question, where are you from? For example, there's an attempt at this in the book where you say, when you grow up all mishmashed, that's just what you call yourself, like I did with an American passport, an Italian citizenship, and a birth certificate in West Berlin, it might take you a little longer than usual to figure out your place in the world. You're this strange little hybrid of a person, easily adaptable, fluent in many languages, an outsider everywhere. It's the perfect background for becoming a spy. Really. But nobody in the CIA has ever approached me. Eavesdropping on tourists becomes a favorite pastime. So that's why you have difficulty answering the question. How much time do they have looking for that answer? You need to know. Are they going to be bored by the length of your story, or lean in for more? Because there is never one straightforward answer. Even at this advanced age, you don't have a quick answer to the question?
No, I still, when people ask me where I'm from, it depends on who's asking me. The answer depends on who's asking me.
Oh, that way you're very successful. People are very happy. You're thinking more of them than you are of yourself. However, you also say more than once that food and what I wrote down, the stuff of food, the things about food, is the most constant thing about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I find I realized at some point in my young adulthood when I was cooking on a regular basis that being active in the kitchen was the one thing that was the same no matter what place I was in. And I found that really comforting.
And you were moving around when you were a youngster from Berlin to Boston and Boston to Berlin. and summers sometimes in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So you really were jumping around.
Mm-hmm.
And you say that your pots and pans became constant companions, worn wooden spoons in a dull sheen at the bottom of my cast iron pots, a testament to how much I turned to them to find the tastes of home in my roving kitchens. Cooking was crucial. Couldn't shrink the Atlantic Ocean or lessen the 6-hour difference, but it made my world feel a little bit smaller. Not everybody goes into the kitchen and thinks like that.
No, but that was, for me, that was really the most important thing about realizing that. I'd always felt terribly adrift, and the kitchen kind of gave me a home.
One of the things that I would like to get on the record, though, is that in your childhood, as crazy, if you will, in a sense, as it was, there was still some wonderful parenting going on.
Absolutely.
Your description of your life with your dad in Boston is really something else. The way he read to you every night, and it's a very, very lovely life.
Yes, I had good parents, great parents.
Luisa Weiss, you say the name? This kind of sounds familiar to you. Is she the same Luisa Weiss who has a food blog? Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
Luisa Weiss is our guest. She's here to talk about her first book called My Berlin Kitchen, a love story with recipes, published by Viking. And on the back of the jacket, I find a statement by one Deb Perlman, creator of SmittenKitchen.com. Wonderful. I hope, she says, you're prepared to clear a day or two of your schedule once you open this book, because you're not going to want to put it down to do anything. Well, anything but make a beeline for the kitchen to make a rolled omelet or fake baked beans. Luisa has a way of telling her story that's nothing short of entrancing. Fake baked beans? What's that?
So when I was a little girl, my father, I lived with my dad in Boston, and he had a different meal planned for every night of the week, and it was always the same meal. So every Tuesday we had pizza at the pizzeria down the block, or we had hamburger and salad, or we had steamed broccoli and baked beans from a can. And I grew up loving these things, and a few years ago when I was still living in New York, I discovered a recipe for doctoring up a can of beans to make it taste even more homemade. And that's what that recipe's for.
Great. You write at one point, or you tell us in a conversation piece that the publisher sent along, that as a child you would lose him or herself in books to escape the parts of life they found too difficult to deal with. That was your approach as a child. As an adult, I realized that cooking was an equally effective way of distracting myself from sadness or melancholy. Busying myself in the kitchen made me feel useful and relaxed at the same time. And it took my mind off the harder things. Again, this is cooking playing a role in your life, unlike most people, and I think it's what led to the blog. Tell us about the blog. First of all, what is the blog called?
So my blog is called The Wednesday Chef,
and because you've been an editor and you've worked in publishing, and you damn well know that Wednesday is food day in the paper. Right.
Exactly
Okay.
right. And I always looked forward to Wednesdays because that was the day to clip the recipes. And I would clip.
Well, that's the other thing about you. You all your life have been clipping recipes. All right.
Yes, I'm a terrible hoarder of recipes. I had notebooks filled with them, but I never actually used any of them at all. I just made the same spaghetti with tomato sauce and salad for dinner every night. And I was getting really sick of being in this dinner rut, and I was a little bit in need of a distraction at work. And I had discovered food blogs a year or two earlier, and I was totally enchanted by them. So one day I thought, why don't I start a food blog myself? Nobody will read it because I'm definitely the last blogger to the party, but it'll be my challenge to myself. I'm going to work through the recipes I clipped. I'm going to give myself a writing practice, and I'm going to see what comes from it.
So you got cooking practice and writing practice all at the same time.
Yes.
One fell swoop.
Yes.
And the blog has been very successful. The audience, you find, is filled with people who are just like you.
Yes.
They like to cook and read about it and talk about it and have feelings about it. That, to me, is absolutely the most fascinating part of the blog, is that you discovered that people out there have feelings about food.
Yes, I would say that discovering my audience or gaining my audience has been absolutely the best thing about starting my blog. And starting the blog was pretty much one of the best things in my entire life. So the audience really is all that makes it important to me, because it's that sort of relationship with all these readers who are there for me, whether I'm talking about a failed bread recipe or my failed relationship. That is really, it's just been unbelievable. It's been really wonderful. And
people talk to you about both things, failed recipes
yes.
and failed romances
yes.
and things like that.
Yes.
It's amazing.
It's very intimate. Yes, I did not expect it because I thought a food blog, you're writing about food. You're not really writing about your personal life, but I couldn't help but put little bits and pieces of my life into the blog as I started writing it, because eating dinner was inextricably linked with everything else that I was doing on a daily basis. And I would see my readers' responses to when I wrote about my private life, and that just made me feel safe and trusted, and I kind of kept going.
At this point in your life, there was, if I read correctly, lack of joy in your life, and you found the blog and something else that helped that, and it was the look of joy on friends' faces when they made a real from scratch dinner for the first time. It made me feel a lot better than any good day at the office. So you were discovering yourself and what was really important and comforting and, if you will, character building for you.
Absolutely.
Here we go. Food at work in your life. Very consistent.
Yeah.
Very, very consistent. So at this time, you're doing well, I would say, but you continue to be plagued by the same question. It's a question that I think comes from where you come from. And the question is, where do I belong? Do I belong in America in publishing, or what's going on?
Yeah, I am. From my very, very early years, I always felt very split down the middle. When I lived in the United States with my father, I was one person, and when I was in Berlin with my mother, I was another. And I never really was able to reconcile. I never really felt whole, like I was one entire person in both places.
Did you feel strongly that you were two different identities?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very strongly.
That's nasty.
It's rough. It's really rough, especially when you're a kid and you don't really know how to put all of this in words. So I mostly just felt sad. And as I grew older, I think I kept waiting. I kept expecting that it would all fall into place, that being an adult would give me the answer, and I would know where I belonged, and things would just make sense, and they didn't. And so on paper, I had a really nice life. I had a wonderful job. I lived in an amazing city. I had a very nice boyfriend and a great group of friends. But in my gut, I felt still very unwhole. That's not a word, but I felt like something wasn't right, and I didn't really know what it was.
It's tough. It's tough. You knew where to look for the wholeness. It was in the kitchen.
Yes.
It continues to amaze me, but it continues to be true as one reads this wonderful book. My Berlin Kitchen can be said to tell all, even the story of how Luisa Weiss turned down a publishing job in San Francisco. Really? In San Francisco? Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
My Berlin Kitchen, a love story with recipes by Luisa Weiss. That's what we're talking about today. And there is a recipe at the end of almost every chapter. Not all. Be careful of that claim. Not all chapters. Almost every chapter. And Kathleen Flynn, the author of The Sharper Your Knife, The Less You Cry. Well, I don't know what she's into. I suppose it's cooking. I don't know. A beautiful and inspiring story about how we sometimes have to take a leap of faith to follow our life's passion. I was so charmed by Luisa Weiss's honesty, vulnerabilities, and beautiful writing, all while craving braised endives, a lovely, remarkable, and delicious tale of the romance of a lifetime. That's cool. I like that. I like that a lot. Now, one of the chapters in the book is called Eating for Heartbreak. And it covers a period when you've just broken up with a boyfriend, and there's all kinds of opinions out there. Should you eat your way through this, or should you not? And I think you're pretty much come down on the you should not. But there is, and you have to eat. You have to eat, that's for sure. And so you offer an abbreviated version of a Greek salad. Right, tell us about that. Yeah.
Don't bother peeling the cucumber, but slice it in half lengthwise and then in little half moons. Cut the tomatoes into halves or quarters and the feta into small cubes. Combine all of this in a bowl and sprinkle judiciously with oregano, plus a good pinch of flaky salt. Don't skimp on the salt just because of the feta. Trust me, that's a mistake. Your body needs the salt. Haven't you been crying your eyes out? Replenish. Then add a good glug of olive oil and the smallest drip of vinegar. I use white wine vinegar, but you could use champagne, I suppose, or sherry. But whatever you do, no balsamic, I beg of you. And toss the whole thing together.
Wait a minute. Why no balsamic? Balsamic's very popular in my house.
Well, in this case, the feta cubes soak up the balsamic, and they kind of change flavor, and it doesn't work.
Okay. I'm sorry for interrupting.
That's okay.
One of our big flavors at home.
Whatever you do, no balsamic, I beg of you, and then toss the whole thing together until the tomatoes glisten with olive oil, the herbs are dispersed, and the feta is starting to break down ever so slightly at the edges. Now, if it's summer, and I hope it is, because at least then you've got a leg up on the poor winter heartbroken who definitely have the rawer end of the deal, go out onto your balcony, your backyard, or all else failing, your front stoop. I find it rather important to eat this little salad, which might be all you can stomach in a day, in the setting sun. As you crunch your way carefully through the bowl, the sun makes you squint and warms your hair, and the soft evening breeze will feel like a caress, which I think you need almost as much as you need the salad. As your fork spears ever more hungrily, you can start to daydream about that trip to Greece you'd like to think about taking, where you can eat feta and tomatoes all day long, every day, and great big olives, too, and nice warm bread. And there will be a few handsome waiters winking at you as you sit by the bar with your glass of Retsina and your sun-kissed tourist glow. Suddenly you'll find yourself scraping the bottom of your bowl lustily, and you might feel sheepish, or at least a little guilty, for enjoying that simple meal so much when you thought you might never eat again. Don't worry, the heartbreak's not entirely gone, and it won't be until it skulks away of its own accord. But in the meantime, you snuck a meal past its shadowy figure and are feeling rather good, like you wouldn't mind another one of those, or at least a spoon to get at the dregs of the dressing at the bottom of the bowl. Here's a little tip from me to you. No one, but no one, will notice if you raise the bowl to your lips and tip it back, letting the herbed oil and vinegar, flecked with bits of feta and tomato seeds, pour down your throat. You might cough a bit if it's too sharp, and you might feel just a little bit greedy. But it's worth it, I think, to feel your appetite and your lust for life come back to life, one cherry tomato at a time.
That's the best piece of advice in the book, I think.
Thank
Beautiful.
you.
It's wonderful. And it, again, shows us about food and what food can do. Food can lead to a tremendously romantic, satisfying daydream. And it's just wonderful. And there's the other reason for not using the balsamic. You know, when you tip the bowl back and it's balsamic, you'd really start to choke.
You cough, yeah. Absolutely.
But here we are in San Francisco with an author with a wonderful book, with a wonderful story. But one of the bad parts of the story is that she was offered a job in San Francisco, and by golly, she took it and then kicked it back. What's going on here? We feel insulted. I'm surprised they even let you tour San Francisco.
I know. Yeah, I was in a very strange place at the time, psychologically speaking, and I got a wonderful job offer here, and I flew out and I took it really seriously, and I even accepted it. But what I really wanted to do was go in the other direction. I wanted to go back to Berlin.
Go back to Europe.
Yep.
Go back to Berlin.
Yep.
Go back to one of your places.
Yep.
This book's a wonderful opportunity. It's very different. It's inspiring in a way, and very enjoyable. It's called My Berlin Kitchen, a love story with recipes by Luisa Weiss. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.